As someone who claims to have healed a lot of things, I didn't realize until recently that there was one boundary I've been missing my entire life. You see, I. when I was a kid, I used to be a pretty sensitive girl. I was a pretty sensitive young girl. So, just because I felt things too deeply, I wanted to share them with others. I used to tell everyone about my feelings, my thoughts, when I liked or achieved something, just because I wanted to share those things with those who I trusted, right? But it didn't take me long to realize that most of them just didn't care about that. With a logical mind already present enough to notice that, despite my age, I shut down quickly because it hurt me. So I stopped telling others about the few things I did like, and most importantly, I started to treat other people the way I wish they treated me unconsciously. Like giving them emotional support when needed, attention, and overall peace. Maybe because I knew how it felt to not have those things. I know it doesn't sound like something bad to give to other people, because it isn't, but the problem is that I started to mostly attract those who needed healing. Since I bring safety, apparently, I don't know. But since I often saw the broken version of myself reflected on them, I would allow them to vent, to share too much information, TMI, and just let their masks fall off. Because it was something I understood and I craved it as well. I'm looking outside a lot because it's snowing, by the way. The point is that when you become someone who heals whoever comes in front of you, and you build connections with that kind of emotional weight from second one, almost like trauma bonding, those connections eventually will get too heavy for you to a psychological level, especially if you have done a lot of inner work. And as time goes by, you'll end up wondering, do I actually know this person or do I know what hurt them? However, before we continue talking about all this, I think it's important to clarify a few things. And first of all, realistically, I'm sure a lot of great friendships or relationships have begun from trauma bonding, and hey, good for them. But in my opinion, those connections were a success because those people had somewhat of the same level of emotional intelligence and empathy. And sometimes, when someone has not healed in certain areas, cannot offer that. And it's not necessarily their fault. At least, this is all in my experience, because I've been in both places. Second, I'm not saying it's wrong to let some people vent and give them advice. For example, I do it here when I answer comments, and my entire YouTube channel is a space for that. I hope you always feel comfortable enough to share your feelings and thoughts here. If you have something positive to say or personal, I'll be reading it. However, there are some people I generally approach saying, hey, if you need anything, if you need someone to talk to, please let me know and I will listen. Just because it felt aligned. But that's selective, right? And in the next minutes, I'll be talking about this whole thing when there's no kind of selectiveness at all. And third, I'm not saying it's wrong to share trauma, problems, feelings, and so on with people you love and trust. Those are actually things that can strengthen a connection, but it's not something that should happen right away. That's the difference. And overall, you shouldn't be emotionally available to complete strangers all the time. That's something we'll talk about later. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I met a guy with who I connected deeply as friends because the usual for me happened, right? Trauma bonding. God help me. And listen, I'm someone who looks for deep connections because I'm not willing to give my time to someone or something shallow. And also, I want to understand people and be understood. That's not wrong. And for that same reason, I didn't care about us growing closer so quickly, since it felt pretty similar to building something deep. But the problem is that an intense connection can look a lot like a healthy one. And that can be very blinding, because you might think they're the right people for you, meant to be in your life just because they had depth for a while. Or it can also make it look like you're compatible in a ton of more areas, in a ton of more aspects, when in reality, you don't actually know each other yet. And that happened to me, you know? The reason for that, though, is that when I start to trust someone, like develop trust, I'll be saying the most random shit known to mankind. Because that's what goes through my mind, and I like to speak my mind when I trust you. So I did this with this guy, and I ended up being heavily judged for it. Obviously, I ended that friendship that lasted a week because I don't tolerate disrespect or being judged in my personal life. But after that situation, I did begin to analyze all this. Like, okay, I'm someone who constantly attracts these kind of people, and I end up repeating the same patterns or situations where I either heal them and they leave after, I try to receive the same depth and I don't get it, or I try to be myself and it turns out we're not compatible as people. So what's wrong? What am I missing? And I noticed that the boundary that I had been missing my entire life, that would probably allow me to build healthier friendships and maybe even find love, was a boundary around my emotional availability. I was emotionally available to complete strangers before they had even earned that version of me and showed me that they could reciprocate. Remember the kind of friendships we made as kids though? They started from silly things like, I love your dress, do you want to be friends? Or, I don't know, I love your plushie, this is mine, her name is Ribbons. Stuff like that. There was no deep meaning behind those comments, and a lot of people remain friends with those who they met when they were younger for that same reason. Because they started from enjoyment. And only later they became spaces where they could also cry and be vulnerable. And I think that's the best way to start long-lasting connections, through things like similar humor, similar interest, curiosity about what makes that person them, and even similar values. And all that can happen, if we're talking about the modern times, through a simple answer to an Instagram story. It's not about avoiding death forever. It's about peeling those layers little by little until you get to the sensitive topics because you already trust that person. A connection, either a friendship or an actual romantic relationship, of course, should always have the ability to be versatile. Otherwise, you will get stuck on the savior complex, on conversations about personal issues, or just negative energy overall that will drain you, or them, or both of you. It will not be a person you actually know or appreciate as a partner or a friend. You'll just be their therapist or their patient instead. Because everything I say always applies both ways. Understanding all this helped me to stop people when they try to share their trauma with me after knowing each other for just a couple days. Not in a rude way, just like, maybe we can talk about this eventually. Or, this is not the kind of conversation I want to have, but I do appreciate your willingness to share this. And you know what's the biggest difference I've seen around that? That if I stop talking to them for one reason or the other, I feel no different from how I felt the day before or the day prior. Because now I see them how they always were. Someone I didn't talk to long enough to get to know them as a person. And I feel way lighter now. Because I don't rush emotional intimacy anymore. And I also understood that I don't have to carry trauma that's not my own if I don't want to. Because depth isn't about that. It's about how many versions you get to know of someone as time goes by. It's about getting to know a person before you get to know their wounds. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say today. I'm recording this on Friday. My back and my legs hurt. I have new equipment also. I have a ring light and I have a... how do you call this thing? A tripod? I don't know. But it has a remote. It's really good. I'm so happy. I'm excited. I don't know. I had an energy drink. I quit it for 3 months and I went back. Don't ask me why. It's been stressful. Blah, blah. It's been stressful. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a great week. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a like, to leave a comment telling me your thoughts, your feelings. And don't forget to follow me on social media. I have Instagram, I have TikTok, I have Threads. You can find everything on the description below. And we'll see each other next week with a new video. I'm going to enjoy looking at the snow now, and I'm gonna eat something because I'm starving. So, love y'all, and bye bye. See you soon. My mouth is dry. My mouth is dry. Proceeds to grab an energy drink instead of water. God help me.
That's better.